The rain fell like 1,000 shattered mirrors upon the broken stones of Valdrath Keep, each droplet catching the pale moonlight before dissolving into the darkness below. The storm had been raging for 3 days now, ever since the battle that had torn through these ancient halls, leaving nothing but ruin and the bitter taste of ash in the air. Lightning carved jagged wounds across the sky, illuminating for brief, violent moments the silhouette of a woman who knelt among the rubble, cradling something precious against the fury of the heavens. She was not a woman, not truly. She was something far older, far more terrible, and infinitely more alone. Queen Seraphine Valdrath, the blood sovereign, the immortal shadow, the last of the night courts. She had been called many names across the centuries, each one whispered with a mixture of reverence and terror. Her kind had ruled these lands when humanity still huddled in caves, when the world was younger and magic flowed through the earth like blood through veins. Now her kingdom lay in ruins around her, her people scattered or destroyed, and in her arms she held the only thing that mattered anymore, the broken body of a man who had given everything to save what she loved most. Captain Elias Thorne. A human. A mortal soldier from the Federation's elite guard, wearing armor that had once been the pinnacle of human military achievement. Sleek plates of adaptive titanium alloy, integrated energy shields, tactical displays, and combat enhancements that made a single soldier worth a platoon. Now that armor was cracked and scorched, the energy cells dim, the once proud emblem of the Federation barely visible beneath the blood and mud. His face, beneath the shattered visor she had torn away, was peaceful in a way that made her chest ache with something she had not felt in over 1,000 years. Grief. Her wings, vast, magnificent things of membrane and shadow that could blot out the moon itself, folded protectively around them both, shielding his body from the rain even as it soaked through her own hair, plastering the long black strands to her pale skin. Her armor, a masterwork of ancient craftsmanship that predated human civilization, gleamed dully in the storm, black as midnight with silver engravings that told the history of her lineage in a language no living scholar could read. The metal responded to her emotions, and now it seemed to pulse with a faint crimson light that matched the glow of her eyes. Those eyes, the eyes of a predator, of something that had hunted and killed and ruled for longer than most nations had existed, now held an expression that would have shocked anyone who knew her reputation. Sorrow. Raw, devastating sorrow that threatened to crack the iron control she had maintained for centuries. Tears mixed with rainwater on her cheeks, and she did not bother to hide them. There was no one left to see. No one left to witness the moment when the fearsome vampire queen finally broke. "You foolish, beautiful, impossible man," she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that no human throat could produce, a sound like crystal bells and distant thunder. "I told you to run. I commanded you to take her and flee while I held them back. Why didn't you listen? Why do humans never listen?" But she knew why. She had known from the moment she first saw him, 6 months ago, when the Federation had sent envoys to negotiate a truce. The war between the Night Courts and the human territories had raged for decades, a brutal conflict born of fear and misunderstanding and the terrible hunger that drove her kind. She had expected diplomats, politicians, perhaps a few soldiers for protection. She had not expected him. Elias Thorne had been different from the start. Where other humans looked at her with barely concealed terror or disgust, he had met her gaze with something else, not respect exactly but acknowledgement. He saw her as she was, ancient, dangerous, powerful. And he did not flinch. During the negotiations, while the diplomats stammered and sweated, he had stood quietly at attention, watching everything, missing nothing. She had been intrigued despite herself. Then she had introduced him to Lyanna, her daughter. Not by blood. Vampires could not reproduce in the traditional sense, but by choice. A human child she had found 20 years ago, abandoned in the ruins of a village destroyed by the war. An infant left to die in the cold. Seraphine had meant to pass by, to leave the wailing babe to its fate. Her kind did not raise human children. It was not done. It was weakness. But something in that child's cry had pierced through centuries of carefully constructed emotional armor. Perhaps it was the loneliness. Perhaps it was the memory of a time before she became this creature of night and blood, when she too had been vulnerable and afraid. Whatever the reason, she had taken the child. named her Lyanna. Raised her in secret, teaching her the old languages, the old ways, protecting her from both human and vampire alike. Lyanna had grown into a beautiful, fierce young woman with her mother's strength and a human's passionate heart. She had her own room in the keep, filled with books and paintings and all the small treasures of a life carefully sheltered from the horrors of the world outside. Seraphine had given her everything except the one thing Lyanna wanted most: freedom. "She's not a pet," Elias had said during one of his many visits to the keep after the initial negotiations. The truce had held, fragile as spider silk, and he had returned often as the Federation's official liaison. Somehow, those official visits had become longer, the conversations more personal. "You're suffocating her, Your Majesty." "I am protecting her," Seraphine had replied coldly, though her voice lacked its usual edge. "You cannot understand. Humans are fragile. They break so easily. We're tougher than you think." He had smiled then, that infuriating human smile full of warmth and optimism. "And Lyanna has a right to make her own choices, to live her own life. Even if those choices are dangerous. Especially then." They had argued often about this. About freedom and control, about the nature of love and protection, about what it meant to be human or vampire or something in between. Seraphine found herself looking forward to these debates, to the way Elias challenged her assumptions without fear, to the sound of his laugh when she said something particularly aristocratic and out of touch. Lyanna adored him, saw him as an older brother, a friend who treated her like a person rather than a precious, breakable thing. Seraphine had tried to ignore the other feelings that grew between them, the way her heart, a heart that had not truly beat in centuries, seemed to quicken when he entered a room. The way his scent, warm and alive and utterly unlike anything in her cold domain, made her hunger for something other than blood. She was a vampire queen. He was a human soldier. Such things were impossible. But when had impossibility ever stopped her? The raids had started 3 months ago. Not from humans this time, but from her own kind. Radical factions within the night courts who saw the truce as betrayal, who wanted the old ways restored. Humans as cattle, vampires as apex predators, the natural order maintained through blood and fear. They called themselves the Crimson Purists, and they were led by Lord Makardros, a vampire nearly as ancient as Seraphine herself, bitter and twisted by centuries of war. The attacks on human settlements had been brutal, designed to shatter the fragile peace. Seraphine had sent her own forces to stop them, had personally hunted down Purist cells and destroyed them without mercy. But Makar was cunning. While she fought shadows in the borderlands, he had been planning something far worse. The attack on Valdrath Keep had come at dawn, when her power was weakest, when the sun's light limited her abilities. They had come with an army, not just vampires but thralls, blood-bound humans twisted into mindless servants, and worse things, creatures from the deep darkness that even vampires feared to wake. They had come for Lyanna. "Kill the abomination," Makar had declared, his voice booming across the battlefield. "The half-blood that proves our queen has grown weak and sentimental. We will purge this corruption from our bloodline and remind the humans why they should fear the night." Lyanna had not been at the keep. By fortune or fate, Seraphine had finally relented to Elias's arguments and allowed her daughter to visit the Federation capital, escorted by a full guard detail. But Makar did not know this. He believed his prize was within the walls, and he was willing to destroy everything to claim her. The battle had been catastrophic. Seraphine's loyal guards fought with desperate courage, but they were outnumbered 10-1. The ancient walls of Valdrath Keep, which had stood for millennia, crumbled under siege weapons powered by stolen military technology. The hybrid of vampire magic and human warfare created a hell of fire and blood. She had been fighting in the throne room, surrounded by purist elites, when the emergency transmission came through on the Federation channel. Elias's voice tight with urgency, "Your Majesty, we're under attack. Unknown hostiles intercepted our convoy. They're after Lyanna. We're falling back to Sanctuary Point, but I don't know if..." The transmission had cut off in a burst of static and gunfire. The cold rage that filled Seraphine in that moment was absolute. She had torn through her attackers like parchment, her speed and strength amplified by fury beyond anything her enemies had anticipated. blood painted the walls. Bodies fell like rain. Within minutes, the throne room was silent except for her breathing and the drip of crimson from her claws. Mocker had fled, the coward, vanishing into shadow the moment he realized his plan had failed. But the damage was done. Half her keep was destroyed, her forces decimated, and Lyanna, her precious, innocent Lyanna, was in danger. She had flown through the storm, her wings carrying her faster than any machine, racing toward Sanctuary Point. It was an old fortress in the border zone, abandoned for years, a relic of the early war. If Elias had taken Lyanna there, it meant he was buying time, holding a defensive position against impossible odds. When she arrived, the battle was already over. The purest force had been larger than the one that attacked the keep. They had brought everything: vampire knights in blood-forged armor, packs of thralls, even a wardrake, a massive reptilian creature bound by dark magic. The Federation soldiers had fought brilliantly, their advanced weapons and tactics buying precious time, but in the end human technology could only do so much against supernatural fury. Bodies littered the fortress courtyard. Human and vampire both, twisted together in death's embrace. The walls were scorched black by fire and energy weapons. Blood ran in rivers between the stones. And in the center of it all she found him. Elias had made his stand at the fortress's inner sanctum, the most defensible position. Behind him, through a sealed door reinforced with emergency barriers, Lyanna was safe, bruised and terrified but alive. Before him lay the bodies of at least 20 enemies, a testament to his skill and determination. His armor had absorbed incredible punishment, but even Federation technology had limits. A vampire knight's blade had pierced through the chest plate, driven with supernatural strength straight through the energy shielding. He had still been alive when she arrived, barely. The vampire knight who had struck the killing blow was still standing there, savoring his victory, when Seraphine descended upon him. She did not remember killing him. She only remembered the red haze, the tearing and screaming, and then suddenly she was alone with Elias, kneeling beside him as his life bled away onto ancient stones. "Seraphine," he had whispered, using her name for the first time. Not "Your Majesty," or "My Queen," but her name, spoken with such tenderness that it broke something inside her. "Lyanna, is she?" "Safe," Seraphine had assured him, her voice cracking. "You saved her. You impossible, foolish, brave man. You saved her." He smiled then, blood on his lips. "Good. That's good." His hand, heavy in his armor's gauntlet, reached up to touch her face. She caught it, pressed it against her cheek, feeling the warmth of him even through the metal. "I'm sorry, couldn't keep my promise, to take you both to see the ocean." "You will," she said fiercely. "I will not permit you to die. Do you understand me, Captain? I command you to live." But commands meant nothing to the Reaper. His eyes, those warm brown eyes that had looked at her with understanding and something deeper, began to glaze. His breath rattled. His heart, that strong human heart, began to slow. "I lo," he started to say, but death stole the words. She had screamed then, a sound of pure anguish that shattered what remained of the fortress's windows and sent the storm into new fury. She had gathered him in her arms and fled into the sky, leaving Lyanna in the care of the surviving Federation soldiers, promising to return but unable to bear witness to her daughter's tears. Not yet. Not when her own grief was so overwhelming. Now she knelt in the ruins of her ancestral home, holding his body as the rain washed away the blood, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the vampire queen felt powerless. But power was precisely what she had. Ancient power. Forbidden power. The crimson energy began to manifest around her hands, seeping from her palms like luminous smoke. It was the blood gift, the fundamental magic that defined her kind, pushed to its absolute limits. Vampires could heal themselves, sustain themselves, enhance their bodies beyond mortal limits. But could that power extend to another? Could it bring back the dead? It had been tried before. The ancient texts in her library spoke of such attempts, and they all ended the same way: the creation of thralls, mindless creatures bound to their master's will, alive but not truly living. The vampires who performed such resurrections were eventually hunted down and destroyed, their crimes against the natural order considered too great to forgive. But those vampires had not been as powerful as Seraphine. They had not been the last of the pure bloodline, descended directly from the first dark. And they had not loved the one they were trying to save. "I will not lose you," she whispered, her voice steady now with terrible resolve. "Not when I have only just understood what you mean to me. Not when there are words left unspoken and years unlived and moments unstolen. You gave everything for what I love. Now I will give everything for you." The magic intensified, the crimson light growing brighter, pulsing in rhythm with a heartbeat that existed only in memory. She pressed her hand against his chest, over the wound that had killed him, and poured her power into him. Not to create a thrall. Not to bind him to her will. But to offer him a choice, the same choice she had been given a millennium ago in a life she barely remembered. The choice to return. It was agony. The magic tore at her, demanding more than she had ever given, draining her strength in ways that physical combat never could. Her vision blurred. Her wings trembled and began to dissolve into shadow. But she did not stop. She gave him everything, her power, her life force, her ancient blood mixed with the wild magic of the storm above. And slowly, impossibly, the wound began to close. His armor's diagnostic systems flickered back to life, displaying impossible readings. His temperature rising. Blood pressure stabilizing. Neural activity spiking. The AI system struggled to process what it was witnessing, its algorithms unable to categorize the supernatural energy flooding its user's body. Seraphine felt the moment his heart beat again. What? Then twice. A rhythm tentative and fragile as a newborn bird, but growing stronger with each pulse. His chest expanded with breath. His eyes moved beneath their lids. She should stop. She had done enough. But still the magic flowed, and she realized with shock that it was no longer just coming from her. The storm itself was responding, lightning reaching down to strike the highest tower of the ruined keep, channeling raw elemental power into the spell. The ancient stones beneath them glowed with sigils that had not activated in centuries, responding to the presence of a true heir of Valdrath performing the old magic. The world itself was helping her. When Elias's eyes finally opened, they were no longer entirely human. The warm brown had gained flecks of crimson, tiny stars of red in a familiar sky. His body still lived, still breathed, still possessed all the traits of mortality. But something else resided there now, something of her magic, her essence, woven into his being at the most fundamental level. He was not a vampire. But he was no longer entirely human either. Seraphine? His voice was hoarse, confused. He tried to sit up and she gently supported him, her strength nearly spent. I died. I remember dying. You did, she confirmed, her voice barely a whisper. And I brought you back. I had no right. I gave you no choice. I am selfish and cruel and I apologize for nothing. He looked at her, truly looked, and saw the exhaustion in her face, the way her form flickered between solid and shadow, the terrible price she had paid. Slowly, with movement still uncertain, he reached up and cupped her face with both hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. You damn fool, he said, but his voice held no anger, only wonder. What have you done? Whatever was necessary, she replied. I lost my kingdom today. I lost my home, my people, my power. I will not lose you too. And then he did something that surprised her even more than his resurrection. He laughed. A genuine, full-hearted laugh that echoed across the ruins and seemed to push back the darkness itself. Your Majesty, he said, formal title turned endearment, I think we need to have a serious conversation about your control issues. Despite everything, the death, the pain, the uncertain future that stretched before them, Seraphine found herself laughing too. It was a sound she had not made in centuries, rusty and strange but somehow perfect in this moment of impossible second chances. The rain began to ease. The storm, having spent its fury, moved on to trouble other lands. The moon emerged from behind the clouds, full and bright, painting the ruins in silver light. And in that light, holding each other among the broken stones of a fallen kingdom, the vampire queen and the resurrected soldier found something neither had expected. The journey to Liona took 2 days. Seraphine was too weakened to fly, her wings refusing to fully manifest, and Elias was still adjusting to the changes in his body. They traveled on foot through the borderlands, avoiding both human and vampire territories, two beings who no longer quite fit in either world. Elias discovered quickly that he was stronger than before, his reflexes enhanced, his senses sharper. He could see in the darkness now, though not with a vampire's perfect night vision. He healed faster, could go longer without food or water, and most strikingly he could sense the magic that permeated everything around them, the life force of trees and animals, the residual energy of old battlefields, the way Seraphine herself burned like a beacon even in her weakened state. "What am I?" he asked on the second night as they sheltered in a cave while Federation patrol drones hummed overhead, searching for survivors from the Sanctuary Point attack. Seraphine sat across from him, her form more stable now but still not entirely recovered. She looked somehow younger than before, as if giving away so much of her power had stripped away some of the weight of centuries. "I do not know," she admitted. "Nothing like this has been done before, not successfully. You are not a vampire, your heart beats, you can walk in sunlight without pain, you have no hunger for blood. But you carry my essence within you now, woven into your very being. You're something new. Something unprecedented. Will I age? Will I die?" She met his eyes, and in them he saw uncertainty for perhaps the first time. "I believe so. Slower than before, perhaps. You may have decades, even centuries. But you are not truly immortal. The human part of you will eventually claim victory over the magic. When I cannot say." He absorbed this quietly, and she waited for anger, for accusations of unwanted transformation. Instead he asked, "And you? You gave so much to bring me back. What did it cost?" "My full power will return in time," she said. "Months, perhaps years. I will never again be as strong as I was. The spell required more than energy, it required sacrifice. I am diminished permanently. Several centuries of accumulated power, gone. Do you regret it?" The question hung between them in the darkness. Outside, rain began to fall again, gentler this time, a whisper against stone rather than a scream. "Ask me again in 100 years, Seraphine finally said, a small smile playing at her lips. "When you are old and gray and I am still watching the centuries pass. Ask me then if I regret choosing love over power, life over pride, you over an empire." He crossed the small space between them and took her hand. His touch was warmer than hers, still carrying the heat of life, but no longer felt alien to her supernatural senses. The magic she had given him recognized its source, hummed in harmony with her own diminished power. "I will hold you to that," Elias said. 100 years. It's a date. They found Lyanna at a Federation field hospital, surrounded by guards but unharmed. The reunion was everything Seraphine had hoped for and feared. Her daughter ran to her, then to Elias, tears streaming down her face, words tumbling over each other in relief and joy and anger at being left behind. "Never again," Lyanna demanded, holding them both with fierce strength. "Never leave me behind again. Whatever comes next, we face it together. All of us. Promise me." "I promise," Seraphine said and meant it. "We promise," Elias agreed. The Federation command wanted answers. They wanted to know what had happened at Sanctuary Point, why their liaison officer now registered as something other than human on their medical scanners, what the Vampire Queen wanted in their territory. But before any debriefing could occur, news arrived that changed everything. Lord Mocker Dross had declared himself the new Night King. He had rallied the purest factions, gathered an army, and marched on the neutral territories, breaking the truce completely. Villages were burning. Refugees fled in every direction. The fragile peace that Seraphine and Elias had worked to build was crumbling. "He thinks I am dead or broken," Seraphine said, standing in the Federation command center, studying the tactical displays with ancient eyes. "He thinks the old queen is gone and nothing stands between him and total war." "He's not entirely wrong," General Morrison said bluntly. The old soldier had commanded the Federation's military forces for 20 years and had no patience for diplomatic niceties. "No offense, Your Majesty, but our intelligence says you're operating at a fraction of your former strength. Can you even fight at all? I can fight, Seraphine replied, her voice cold as winter. The question is whether you will fight beside me. Mocker will not stop at vampire territories. He believes in the old ways, humans as prey, the night eternal. He will bring an age of darkness to your people that will make the previous war seem gentle. She's right, Elias said, stepping forward. He wore new armor now, custom-built by Federation engineers trying to account for his altered physiology. It was sleeker than standard issue, with integrated systems designed to channel magical energy as well as conventional weaponry. He looked like what he was, something caught between two worlds belonging fully to neither. Then we need a plan, Morrison said. And it better be a damn good one. The plan they developed over the following weeks was audacious and desperate in equal measure. Seraphine could not face Mocker in direct combat, not in her weakened state. But she did not need to. What she needed was to prove to the vampire factions that the old ways were dead, that a new path existed, that peace between their kinds was not only possible but necessary for survival. She needed to create a symbol. The battle was set for the ruins of Valdrath Keep. Mocker had claimed it as his fortress, raised his banners above the broken towers, and declared it the seat of his new dark empire. He had done so specifically to taunt Seraphine, knowing she would eventually come to reclaim her ancestral home. He was not wrong, but neither was he prepared for what she brought with her. The combined force that marched on Valdrath Keep 3 months after Elias's resurrection was unlike anything the world had seen. Vampire loyalists who had remained faithful to Seraphine stood alongside Federation troops. Human soldiers trained in anti-supernatural combat fought beside vampire warriors wielding blood magic. Engineers and mages worked together, combining technology and sorcery into devastating new weapons. And at their head marched 3 figures who represented the future. A vampire queen diminished but unbroken, a human girl who carried the love of both species within her heart, and a resurrected soldier who embodied the possibility of transformation and second chances. The battle was brutal and glorious and terrible. Mocker's forces were numerous and fanatical, driven by centuries of hatred and fear. But Seraphine's coalition fought with something stronger: purpose. They were not fighting to dominate or destroy. They were fighting for the right to choose a different future. Elias found himself in the thick of combat, his hybrid nature allowing him to match vampire speed while utilizing human tactical thinking. His armor's weapons blazed with energy and magic both, a fusion that confused and terrified Mocker's purists. He could feel Seraphine's power moving through him, guiding his movements, lending him strength he should not possess. They were bonded now, he realized. The resurrection had tied them together in ways neither fully understood. He could sense her emotions, her pain when her people fell, her fierce joy when they pushed forward. And she could sense him, his determination, his fear, his absolute refusal to fail. Lyanna fought too, despite both her parents' protests. She had trained in secret with Federation Special Forces, learned to fight with weapons and wit and the fierce intelligence she had inherited from Seraphine. She coordinated the combined forces, her voice on the comms network steady and sure, translating between human and vampire, finding common ground where none should exist. The final confrontation came in the throne room, the same place where Seraphine had killed her attackers months before. Mocker waited there, seated on her throne, a mockery of kingship dressed in stolen regalia. "You should have stayed dead," he said when she entered. Elias and Lyanna flanked her, along with a mixed guard of the fiercest warriors from both sides. "You have become weak, Seraphine. Love has made you pathetic." "Love has made me stronger than you could ever understand," she replied. "You see weakness in caring for others. I see the power to inspire loyalty that fear can never match. Look around you, Mocker. Your army is breaking. My people fight beside humans not because I command it but because they choose to. Because they have seen another way. Then they are traitors and will die as such." He lunged, faster than human eyes could follow, claws extended and aimed at her heart. But Elias was faster. The months since his resurrection had changed him in ways even he did not fully understand. The magic in his blood resonated with Seraphine's, and in this moment, standing between her and death, it blazed to full power. He caught Mocker's strike with his bare hand, the vampire's claws scraping uselessly against skin that had become hard as stone. "You will not touch her," Elias said, his voice carrying harmonics that were not entirely human. "Not while I draw breath. And I suspect I will be breathing for a very long time." The look of shock on Mocker's face was almost comical. He tried to pull away but Elias held firm, and then Seraphine was there, her own claws flashing out to strike. She was weaker than before, yes, but she was not fighting alone. Their powers combined, magic and determination and love flowing between them like an electric current. Mocker fell not because Seraphine was stronger but because she had what he lacked, people willing to die for her cause rather than just her commands. The battle ended not with celebration but with exhaustion. Too many had died. The keep was more ruined than ever. The cost of victory lay heavy on all their hearts. But the war was over. In the months that followed, a new order emerged from the ashes. The Federation and the Night Court signed a true peace treaty, not fragile like before, but built on mutual respect and understanding. Mixed councils formed, with representatives from both peoples working together to address the needs of all. Trade routes opened. Cultural exchanges began. The ancient hatred did not vanish overnight, but it began, slowly, to fade. Valdrath Keep was rebuilt, but not as it was. The new structure incorporated both vampire aesthetics and human engineering, a fusion of old magic and new technology. It became the seat of the Council of Twilight, a governing body composed equally of humans and vampires, dedicated to maintaining the peace and exploring the possibilities of cooperation. Seraphine's power gradually returned, though as she had predicted, never to its full original strength. She found she did not miss it as much as she expected. The influence she wielded now was different, earned through respect rather than fear, built on alliances rather than dominance. Elias remained by her side, officially as the Federation's permanent ambassador, unofficially as something far more significant. Their relationship scandalized both societies at first, but they bore the whispers with grace and patience. Over time, they became a symbol themselves, proof that the divide between their peoples could be crossed, that love could bridge even the widest chasms. Lyanna grew into a remarkable young woman, eventually taking a position on the council herself. She became a voice for the marginalized in both societies, fighting for the rights of half-bloods and hybrids, for humans living in vampire territories and vampires trying to integrate into human cities. She was proof of what Seraphine had believed all along, that family was not defined by blood or species, but by choice and love. Years passed. Then decades. The world continued to change as worlds do. New conflicts arose, different challenges emerged. But the foundation they had built held strong. Elias aged as Seraphine knew he would, but slower than ordinary humans. His hair grayed, but his strength remained. The magic in his blood sustained him, extended his life beyond normal mortal span, but could not halt the march of time entirely. Seraphine watched the years touch him with fingers gentle compared to how they treated others, and she treasured each line on his face, each silver strand in his hair. On the 50th anniversary of his resurrection, they stood together on the rebuilt battlements of Valdrath Keep, watching the sunset paint the horizon in shades of gold and crimson. The world below was peaceful, the settlements of humans and vampires coexisting in ways that would have seemed impossible a lifetime ago. "Do you regret it?" Elias asked, echoing the question from that cave so many years before. "Giving up your power for me? You could have ruled for eternity, Seraphine." Unchallenged. Absolute. She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder, her hand finding his. "I ruled for 1,000 years before you," she said quietly. "Do you know what I remember most from those centuries? The loneliness. The endless, crushing weight of immortality spent apart from anything that mattered. These 50 years with you have been worth more than all those lifetimes of power. You're going to make me cry and I'm too old for that," he said with a laugh, but his eyes were indeed wet. "You are not that old," she teased. "Another 100 years at least if I have my way." "Is that an order, Your Majesty?" "It is a request, Captain. From one who loves you." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. The setting sun caught the crimson flecks in his eyes, made them glow like ember stars. Then I suppose I must oblige. It would be terribly rude to refuse such a request. They kissed then as the sun sank below the horizon and the stars emerged, vampire queen and resurrected soldier, bound together by magic and choice and love that had refused to recognize the boundaries of species or mortality. Lina found them there an hour later, still standing together watching the night sky. "You two are disgustingly romantic," she said, but she was smiling. "There's a delegation from the Western Territories waiting. Something about establishing formal trade relations. Are you coming, or should I tell them the Queen is busy being sentimental?" "We should not keep them waiting," Seraphine said, reluctantly pulling away from Elias. "Though I reserve the right to be sentimental at every opportunity. I have earned it." "That you have, mother," Lina agreed, and the word, spoken with such warmth and certainty, still made Seraphine's heart swell even after all these years. They walked together back into the keep, three figures illuminated by starlight, the family forged not by blood but by sacrifice and love and the refusal to let go. In the centuries that followed, bards would sing songs of the vampire queen who defied death itself for love. Scholars would study the peace she built, analyzing the delicate balance between cooperation and autonomy. Historians would debate the exact details of the Battle of Valdrath Keep and the resurrection that preceded it. But those who had been there, who had witnessed the truth, knew that the story was simpler and more profound than any legend could capture. It was the story of a mother who would do anything to protect her daughter. It was the story of a soldier who gave his life without hesitation. It was the story of a queen who learned that true power lies not in dominance, but in connection. And it was the story of love that refused to accept death as an ending, that fought and sacrificed and transformed the world rather than surrender to loss. Elias Thorne lived for another 150 years after his resurrection, his life extended far beyond human norms by the magic woven into his being. He saw his grandchildren grow old, for Lina eventually married and had children of her own, beautiful hybrid beings who carried both human and vampire traits in perfect balance. He watched the world transform, saw the Federation and night courts merge into something new, a society where species mattered less than character. And when he finally lay dying, truly dying this time with the magic unable to sustain him any longer, it was Seraphine who held him, just as he had been held all those years ago in the rain. "Will you bring me back again?" he asked, his voice weak but his eyes still carrying those crimson stars. "Would you want me to?" she replied, tears streaming down her face. He smiled. "No. I think I've lived enough. Loved enough. Done enough. It's been a good life, Seraphine. A better one than I ever deserved." "You deserved every moment," she whispered fiercely. "You deserved eternity. I got something better. I got you." He closed his eyes then, his breathing slowing, his heartbeat fading. But unlike that terrible day in the ruins, Seraphine did not scream. She did not rage against the dying of his light. Instead, she held him gently and sang an ancient lullaby in a language dead for millennia, a song about stars and journeys and the promise of rest after long struggles. When his heart finally stopped, she felt the bond between them shift but not break. The magic she had given him returned to her, flowing back like a tide, bringing with it echoes of everything he had experienced, every joy and sorrow and moment of wonder. She would carry him with her now, forever, a part of her essence the way she had once been part of his. It would have to be enough. Centuries later, Seraphine still ruled, or rather guided, the society she and Elias had built together. She was no longer called the Blood Sovereign or the Immortal Shadow. Now they called her the Peacekeeper, the Bridge Builder, the Guardian of the Twilight Accord. She wore her title with quiet pride, but in her private chambers she kept a shrine to memories. Elias's armor restored and preserved. Holographic recordings of his laugh, his voice reading bedtime stories to Lina's children. The blade that had killed him and the hand that had brought him back, one displayed above the other, a reminder of endings and beginnings. On the anniversary of his death, she would visit his memorial in the gardens of Valdrath Keep. It was a simple stone, marked only with his name and dates and a single line, He died protecting her daughter, and love refused to let him go. Others had been laid to rest around him over the centuries. Lyanna, though she had lived to nearly 130, their children and grandchildren, loyal friends and brave warriors. The garden had become a place of pilgrimage, where people came to remember the sacrifices that had built their peaceful world. Seraphine knelt before Elias's stone, placing fresh flowers as she did every year, and spoke to him as though he could hear. The world continues to change, my love. We have established colonies on the moon now. Can you imagine? Vampires and humans living together among the stars, building something neither could have created alone. Your great-great-great-grandchildren are among the pioneers. They have your courage and Lyanna's fierce heart. They would have made you proud. The wind whispered through the garden, rustling leaves in a way that almost sounded like laughter. I miss you, she continued, her voice softer now. I have lived for over 2,000 years and I suspect I will live for 2,000 more. But nothing in all that vast eternity will ever compare to the time I spent with you. You taught me that immortality without love is just a longer death. You showed me that choosing the people we care about over power or pride or eternal rule is not weakness. It is the greatest strength of all. She stood slowly, her eyes lingering on the stone. I will see you again when my time finally comes. Wherever we go after this life, whatever waits beyond the darkness, I know you will be there. Waiting. Smiling that ridiculous optimistic smile. Ready to debate the nature of eternity itself. As she walked back toward the keep, she felt it, a warmth against her chest where the magic still resided. A pulse like a heartbeat that was not her own. An echo of love that death could not diminish. He was still with her. Would always be with her. And she would carry him forward into whatever future awaited, remembering always the day she knelt in the rain and refused to let go. The story of the vampire queen and the resurrected soldier became legend, passed down through generations, retold in countless variations. Some versions focused on the battle and heroism. Others emphasized the romance, the tragic beauty of impossible love. Still others treated it as a political allegory about unity and cooperation. But the true story was simpler than legend and deeper than allegory. It was about a being who had lived so long she had forgotten what it meant to be vulnerable, until a human soldier looked at her and saw not a monster or a monarch, but a person. A woman carrying the weight of centuries, desperately trying to protect the only thing she had left to love. It was about a man who understood that some things were worth dying for, and that protecting the innocent was not just duty but honor and privilege. It was about a daughter who proved that family is made by choice and love, not blood and tradition. And ultimately, it was about the truth that echoes through every age, every species, every world. That love, in all its forms, is worth any sacrifice. That death is not the end if memory endures. That the boundaries we build between ourselves and others, species, mortality, power, are illusions that only fear sustains. And that sometimes refusing to let go is not weakness or obsession, but the greatest act of courage we can perform. In the deepest archives of Valdrath Keep, sealed behind wards that only Seraphine could open, there rested a journal. It was a simple thing, leather-bound and worn, filled with Elias's handwriting. He had kept it secretly during their years together, recording his thoughts and observations, his fears and hopes, his love. Seraphine had found it after his death, and though it pained her to read, she returned to it often. Particularly to one entry written just months after his resurrection, when they were still figuring out what they meant to each other. She thinks she is the one who saved me, but she does not understand. I was not truly alive before I met her. I was existing, performing my duties, following my training. But I was not awake to the world's possibilities. She gave me not just breath and heartbeat, but purpose. She showed me that courage is not the absence of fear, but loving so deeply that you act despite it. She taught me that power means nothing without someone to protect, that immortality is worthless without moments worth remembering. I do not know how long I will have, decades or centuries or just years. But however long it is, I will spend it loving her and Lyanna, building the world we all deserve, proving that the impossible is only impossible until someone refuses to accept it. She died protecting her daughter once, in a way. She gave up everything she was to raise a human child in a world that forbade it. I died protecting that same daughter. She brought me back. I think that makes us even. I think that makes us eternal. Seraphine would read those words and weep, even centuries after his death, because they were truer than he had known. They were eternal. Not in the sense of living forever, but in the sense that what they had created, the peace, the family, the love that changed the world, would outlast any single lifetime. Every time a human and vampire fell in love across species lines, they were eternal,